Today's topic is the foundations of American government. When we think about government in the United States, it's probably best to start back at the beginning when people first decided to settle down and have civilizations. When people began first living amongst other people, it became evident that rules and laws were necessary. What was to prevent one person from taking the property of another person? Or what about murder? Government is the institution needed to deal with these issues in society and also deal out punishment. So the purpose of government for our United States was many. First of all, the colonists wanted to fix what was wrong under the rule of Great Britain. So they wanted to form something that was a little bit better, or as they put it, more perfect. Justice is something that is needed when crimes are committed. And so if somebody comes to my house and breaks in and steals my electronics equipment, it is nice to know that I can call the police and I can file a police report, and the people responsible for stealing my equipment, if found, will be prosecuted. Some of the other things that government serves the purpose for would be things like just promoting the general welfare, that making sure that everybody has things they need, medicines and health insurance and unemployment insurance and so on and so forth. Common defense is also important because if North Korea were to attack Kansas, it's nice to know as Kansans we're not on our own. We can call on the U.S. government to help. The basic concepts of democracy were born a few thousand years ago. Some of these basic concepts of democracy are the worth of the individual. And if you think about what that means for a minute, it simply means that each individual is a worthy person, that we are not second-class citizens, and that any group of people is not less than another group, which really ties into the second one, which is equality for all people. And that word equality, if you think about it for a minute, has evolved over time. If you think about what the word equality meant in the late 1700s, it is certainly different, very different, than what it means today. And in fact, I think that all of us would agree that equality is still evolving. We have groups in our society who are still fighting for rights of equality and so on. Majority rule and minority rights simply means that with the majority, what most people would like to do, we have to always be mindful of other people's rights. So, for instance, I have freedom of speech so long as I don't infringe upon other people's rights by slandering them. Compromise. Compromise is also important. If you think about compromise, you probably do this on a daily basis. Have you ever gone out with some friends and wanted to go to a movie or get something to eat? Compromise is necessary. It is virtually impossible for everybody to agree all the time on everything. So compromise, some of us have to give and take all the time. We know this in relationships, and like I mentioned, when we go out with friends and we're trying to decide on a movie or where we want to eat, some of us are not agreeing with the others, but we go with the majority and we compromise. And then individual freedoms, of which we have a lot as Americans. Sometimes this is something that we take for granted, that in other countries, other people are not so lucky. But we have a lot of individual freedom, and simple things like traveling, even freely around the city or in the state or around the country, your freedom of religion, etc. Those things that we just kind of take for granted that, yeah, we should have those, are not accessible in other countries. The First Continental Congress was a meeting that occurred in September of 1774 in which the colonists got together and they discussed things that they were upset about. And so they wrote these things down, called the Declaration of Rights, and they sent it over to Britain, and they said, let's see what the British think of this. Let's see what they might do. Maybe they will fix some of these problems. And in order to make sure that the British know that we're serious, we are going to refuse to trade with England until the taxes and trade regulations were gone. And so they organized some committees that were to enforce boycotts which they did, and they said, hey, let's get back together in May and we'll discuss how Britain reacted. The Second Continental Congress was the second meeting that occurred in May, their follow-up meeting, and this was when they sat down and they said, you know what, that Declaration of Rights didn't really go over very well. Nothing really was fixed. In fact, things are a little bit worse, and so we're going to have to act unless we're willing to settle for these conditions under which we're living. And so they agreed that they would go ahead and start the wheels turning of a revolution. They created a Continental Army, and they named George Washington the leader of. And they did several things under this Second Continental Congress, which really lasted for about 5 years and was our first national government. But they did everything from fighting the Revolutionary War to borrowing money, creating a monetary system, buying supplies, making treaties with foreign nations, in effect being their own independent country. Now, once the Revolutionary War was fought and won, states were to, these colonies that became states, were to write constitutions, their own little pact. And there were some common threads in these constitutions that were evident in all the states. And these are 4 things in which all appeared that the colonists felt were very important from their experiences. Popular sovereignty was the first thing, and that is that power comes from the people, that as people and citizens in our country, we give our government power, and if our government isn't responding the way we would like it to do or functioning the way we would like it, we can take our power back, and one way we can do that is we can vote out certain people of office, or radically we could revolt and have a revolution. Limited government means that government is not all powerful, that there are limitations on what government can do, that it can't do whatever it wants. Government can't regulate how many children we have and what religion we have to be, or if we practice a religion at all. We don't have a national language. So government is limited in that it's not all powerful. Civil rights and liberties are important. When we talk about the Constitution, we'll see that the Bill of Rights came in right after the Constitution was ratified, because civil rights and liberties were something very important the colonists all agreed on that should be allowed for. We all have certain rights, speedy trial, and these have changed over time. Right to bear arms. So civil rights and liberties were very important to the colonists. They wanted to make sure that their rights would not be trampled upon like they were under the government of England. So we wanted to make sure that there were certain things in the Constitution: freedom of speech, freedom to petition, etc., freedom to assemble, that would be protected by the government for all people. Separation of powers ensures that government power does not lie in just one, what we will see 3 branches in one of those 3 branches. So we spread the power out, and that's kind of a safety feature that goes in with checks and balances with our 3 branches. We'll discuss this more with the Constitution unit. But this basically works that for any government function you have to have the cooperation of 2 branches, so that one branch doesn't become too powerful and act independently. And so it's a way that we can keep our government in check. Now, the Articles of Confederation were a document that we first lived under, in which it was pretty weak. There are lots of weaknesses that you can see here on the slide. Remember when we talked about compromise, the Articles of Confederation could only be changed with 100% consent from the states. And so if we tried to vote on something in class, it would be difficult to get 100% agreement on anything. So this is virtually impossible to amend. A confederation, we'll see too, is a loose organization of a government. There's not really a central government to kind of lay down the law and lead the way. These are just independent states kind of acting as cousins. So this isn't really that effective and doesn't last too terribly long. There's no executive branch, there's no court system, there's not a lot that Congress can do. Um, and really, it kind of makes sense. The colonists were gun shy. They were worried about creating a government that would be similar to the one that they just revolted and broke away from and became independent from. And so you really can't blame them too much for that. Now, what they will go on to create is something that had never been created before yet, and that would be the Constitution of the United States, which we will discuss later.